there's still some confusion over who owns a dam or who may have legal responsibility for a dam after a dam wall collapsed in Paardekraal near Rustenburg. Seems it collapsed on Monday night. The municipality has been warning some of the rivers further down from the dam would now be overflowing. Could be quite dangerous. This follows the collapse of that mine tailings dam in Jagersfontein just 2 months ago. Paul Sebegoe is the Northwest Chair for the South African National Civics Organisation. Paul, good afternoon to you, sir, and thank you for your time. At this stage, do you know who owns this dam? I've seen conflicting reports about who has to take responsibility here.
Yes, indeed, it is true. The matter is still not yet resolved. However, there will have to be mechanisms that will have to be put in place to ensure that this matter is resolved as a matter of urgency.
Do you know what damage this is causing? I mean, we've seen water flowing and really very strongly near Paardekraal.
Yes, we are fully aware. Hence, there would have to be an immediate establishment of the risk assessment committee, which must also include communities, especially within the surrounding area. And this must also be a learning curve for the rest of all mining host communities where there are dams around their area. And at the same time, we will have to ensure that there is a speedy consideration of necessary actions that will have to be taken, because it is quite clear that this activity is illegal, because there seems not to be any means to take direct responsibility, including the mine within the area there, because you would know that the land in question is divided into both ownership of the mine as well as the municipality. The person who's operating there necessarily is not a direct owner of the land per se. So there will have to be some deeper investigations to establish what type of an arrangement or of agreement has been entered into for this type of an operation, as well as necessary processes that should have been pursued at the level of the municipality in such cases, so that we will have to follow up whether there is any existing bylaw that gives effect to this type of an establishment.
Do you know, did this definitely happen on land owned by a mine or that belonged to a mine?
There is a discussion. The matter is still not yet resolved. On one side, you hear the mine not taking direct responsibility. And on the other side, there is still not information that is coming clear of the type of arrangements that were entered into when this type of an activity took place. Because I must also indicate that there are children whose lives were lost in the very same dam some time back. And the matter is still in court, still not yet resolved. And currently, even this matter, there would have been some engagement in the past, but not much has been achieved as such. So somewhere we'll have to trigger a process where somebody will have to be held accountable, whether it be the mine, if they have given this person a permission to operate in that space. And we would also want to establish what necessary processes were undertaken in as far as the municipality is concerned. You would know that any form of activity that must take place, there are specific regulations that have to be taken into consideration. In this particular case, your DMR regulation in relation to control of mining dams and tailings, as well as the Environment Act, which also controls the administration of dams, particularly within the mining area.
As I understand it, it almost doesn't matter who owns the mine. The Department of Water Affairs has a legal responsibility to check on dams and to check on dam walls. So there were inspection reports at Jagersfontein, even though that was definitely owned by a mine. Do you know if they've been inspecting this dam? Because that report will suddenly become very important. There should be a maintenance inspection report or a maintenance log that was conducted by the National Department of Water Affairs on this particular dam.
We don't have that information. It will also be one of our interests. Like I've just indicated to you, if this dam was done properly, there would have been necessary processes that would have been followed. That ultimately would have enabled this dam being registered as an existing dam as such. So you can see that this one is an informal arrangement in place. That's why we want to establish what processes were undertaken, because at one point there were already these challenges of the current situation that is very dangerous to the exposure of the children within that area. And since then, nothing has actually been done. We want to see if this dam complies with all necessary legislations. And if not so, I think there will have to be an immediate close of this dam as a matter of urgency.
Do you know if the council around that area actually has the resources to help people there, to actually make sure that there's no permanent damage?
It can only be through regulations by bylaws. At this point in time, we must agree, even nationally, provincially, it's quite clear that there's a vacuum, there's a lacuna there in terms of necessary regulations that would have to exist. Because the global warming that we are going through as a country, it's something that has not happened for many, many years. And you can see the weather patterns as they change. They actually have some replica effects as such across the country per se. This calls for an immediate review for existing regulations and legislation to ensure there's necessary compliance, especially in terms of the risk management. That's why it will have to be necessary that there must be an establishment of the risk communities, which must also include the host communities, members of the public. It must not only be limited to those who are conducting some operations within these areas, so that they are able to make direct input and also be able to monitor on a day-to-day basis what the situation is, because you will agree the mine itself, most of the time these dams get created as a result of the closure of the mining rights or end of contracts and so on. So the element of rehabilitation need to be taken very serious, which in this particular case will have to take into consideration what do you do when you exit the area where there are dams, so that it is quite clear to everybody and there's a sign off from all stakeholders who are directly involved in terms of the exposure of such operations.
Paul, thank you. Paul Sebegoe is the chair of the South African National Civics Organisation in Northwest.